6 p.m. May the 12th. It's the calling of the Animal Center's Advisory Board meeting. Before I do anything, I want to read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, alarm will sound or may sound. Everybody should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell and in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke or any other, or use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you've reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating in the emergency vehicles. So again, it is May the 12th, 6 p.m. I'll do a roll call. So Rick Carter here, Mike Eckerd, Archie Archer, Angie Holly, Carl Cola, Kenneth Melton, Chris Potsman, and Steve Samples. So we have a quorum. Setting of agenda. Do I have a motion to set the agenda?
Motion.
Do I have a second? All in favor? The setting of agenda has been approved. Do we have public input for items on the agenda? Would you like to? No? Either one? Okay. Minutes from the previous meeting of March 24th. Do I have an approval of those meetings or minutes? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. So, unfinished business. We have no unfinished business. We'll move to new business. The report from the Blount County+Animal Center staff. So, Charles, if you'd like to take that, let me get you hooked up.
I believe everyone's got a copy of the report I gave you. First page is just the budget recap year to date. Today is the 317th day of our budget year. The center's budget to date, we have about $35,729.67 in unused budget to this date, so we're ahead of schedule, ahead of what we could have spent, and we haven't. For SMACF's budget, we're about $22,776.60 ahead or unused budget to date. So we're anticipating that not changing a whole lot before the end of the year, so we should finish this year well within our allotted budgets for the center and for Smoky Mountains operations. Year to date, we've collected $86,444 in adoption, reclaim, and transport fees, $12,500 in contracted animal control services, for a total of $98,944 fees collected back into the general fund. We've gotten $6,795 worth of donations so far, plus we're in the process of getting a gift from an estate that's worth $67,500 that will go into the donations as well. So we anticipate this year closing with at least $74,295 of donations if we don't get any more before June 30th. Any questions on that? All right, the next page is it just shows you my budget and where I pulled those figures from. So it's the center's budget as well as Smoky Mountain's budget. So that's just a recap. The next two pages are our summary reports. The first one is, since we pushed our last meeting off, this is for the period April 1st through today, well actually through yesterday, May 11th. During that period, we've had 279 dogs and cats brought into the center. We've out-processed 240. Our adoption rates continue to follow the same pattern that they have been for the past few months. But one thing we have not seen this year is the influx in cats like we normally do by this time of year. So I may not have, should have mentioned that because that may jinx it, but, you know, there's been fewer cats brought to us. We've gotten several this week, but usually it starts, you know, earlier than it has. So we may finish under what I estimate about 3,200 animals brought to us this year, but if we're lucky, we may come in under that this year. So this next page is just a recap for this fiscal year. It shows that we've had 2,493 animals brought into the center. That's dogs and cats, but we've also had rabbits and guinea pigs and other animals brought in. And the last page is just what the staff has been working on the last month and a half. You know, it's grass cutting season. We're responsible for taking care of our facility and our grounds, so we've been doing that. I've talked to 4 different companies about recoating our parking lot. It's an asphalt parking lot, and if we don't recoat it regularly, then we're going to have to repair it, which I think and I'm sure will be much more expensive than recoating. So we've had 4 estimates from about $1,500 up to about $2,000, I believe. So we're going to look at those and ask a couple more questions of those companies, and then have our parking lot recoated and restriped. Our performance evaluations have been completed and submitted to Human Resources per the Evergreen guidelines. Since the county has adopted Evergreen and gone to a merit-based system, those evaluations have to be done on an annual basis now, so those are in. Chronos, our timekeeping system, is getting ready to go live, so this is actually the last pay period that we'll be doing paper timesheets, and then we'll go strictly off the computer in Chronos. We've been doing both for the past several months, but we're getting ready to get rid of the paper. Our cat spay and neuter program, we've had 3 Saturdays so far under our spay neuter grant that we got from PetSafe for cats, and they spay or neutered approximately 67 cats to date, which is right on schedule. We had told PetSafe that we would probably do about 250 cats or so with that grant that they gave us. They gave Smoky Mountain Animal Care Foundation a $20,000 grant, and we're partnering with them. So that's been very successful so far. This past Saturday, we participated in a countywide rabies clinic. The health department asked us to participate, and we always do. And the veterinarian gave 43 rabies vaccinations between 10 and 2. Those were the hours that the county gave us to operate that in, so county health department, so that was very good. Jim Nalitz, who's sitting right here, one of our animal control officers, is redoing the old white animal control truck. Instead of us paying to have it painted, he's done that. So instead of it costing thousands of dollars, it's cost us a few $100s. He's almost done with it. He's done an excellent job. So he saved the county quite a bit of money by doing that, and the truck is really going to look nice when it's done, and much more professional than it did prior to him starting on it. I've had 2 or 3 meetings with Southeastern Communications about our phone system, and I don't know if I've spoken with you about our phone system before, but it's my understanding when the phone system was purchased, it was already 10 years old. It's now much older than that, and you can't get parts for it anymore. So I know the county is looking at IT solutions and other things countywide, but my phone system is not very effective or efficient for what we need to do. I can't transfer a call. No one knows how to tell me how to do that. They can't tell me how to recover messages, etc. So long story short, after meeting with IT and Southeast Communications, we've carved out about $6,400 out of our current year budget, and we are installing a new phone system as soon as IT can run the cables. The bid did not include the cabling that's going to be necessary, and IT said that they could do that with the help of maintenance. So we're waiting on them to complete that, and then we will actually be able, and I don't know if, I know most of you or all of you have been out to the center, but I don't know if you've been out there during a Tuesday or a Wednesday midday when they're, 5 or 6 deep at the desk, and Beth has to answer the telephone and take messages for animal control. The new system will allow us to have a voice tree. I know not everyone loves voice trees, but you know, the caller will be able to select animal control. It will go directly to Jeff and Jim's office, and since they carry county smartphones, they can, if they're not in their office, they can call forward that call to their county phone and get that request for service immediately instead of having to wait. So it's going to allow us to provide much better service to the citizens of the county. It's going to free up other people from answering and taking messages when it's really unnecessary for us to do that. So, and we're going to install some other phones. We're going to put one in surgery so our veterinarian can actually, you know, take phone calls if she needs to instead of having to leave the surgery suite. But anyway, I wanted to give you an update on that. And then the last item is the second item you have in your package that I gave you, which is the proposed revision on the county's animal control ordinance. So, which I think was last amended in 1999.
So does anyone have any questions for Charles?
I got a quick question, just for clarification on the gift, Charles. That will be directed toward the center, right? So restricted.
On our donation line item, and by resolution, I think of a couple of years ago, any unused donations automatically are put in reserve for the animal center, and they can be drawn upon as needed.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
So next is 7B. That's discussion and possible action regarding the initial proposed new Blount County Animal Control Resolution. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Charles.
Well, I'm not going to go, unless you want me to, Chairman, I'll go through this, but, well, you know, the old ordinance or the old resolution was from 1999. This expands several areas in here and helps us be more proactive especially when we have animals that bite or can be deemed vicious. It also highlights the state rabies law, which is Section 2, and helps us enforce that. Jeff has spoken with I guess a TWR agent or TWRA or a wildlife officer who's telling us that there's an increase in rabies, and it's coming, you know, our way, and they're seeing more cases of rabies. So, you know, we want to be more proactive enforcing the rabies law and making sure that people who own dogs and cats that are 6 months or older have a current rabies vaccination, and state law requires them to have that, and for dog owners it requires them to wear a collar and display the rabies tag all the time. So you know, we've started at the center now. When we have a stray animal brought to us, before it can be reclaimed by its owner, the owner must show proof of current rabies vaccination, or else the veterinarian gives them a rabies vaccination and they're charged the state fee of $10 for that vaccination. So we've included rabies in that and expanded that a little bit. The stray animals, Section 3, animals at large, just updates a little bit of what the prior resolution has, and mentions, like, for instance, in a dog park, you know, in 1999, I guess dog parks were really not even envisioned or considered, but there is one now. So, you know, if you have a dog at a dog park, you're allowed to have it off leash as long as it's inside the park and you follow their rules. So, but otherwise, you know, they must be leashed. They can't run at large and things like that. So we've just expanded that a little bit, and I think done a better job of defining what at large is. Section 4 deals with impounding animals, and just sort of elaborates on what we already do. The state allows an animal, a stray animal, to be held for 3 or 5 days. We've added business days in there because we don't think it's really fair for someone who's lost their animal on a Friday and they don't, you know, they they don't start looking until Saturday afternoon with us. You know, they look for the animal and they can't find it. Well, we're closed Saturday afternoon, we're closed Sunday and Monday. So, you know, by the old law, if the animal didn't have a collar on it Monday morning, that animal could have been adopted or euthanized. So we've expanded that to say business days, which, you know, and when we say that, we mean our business days. You know, we're open to the public Tuesday through Saturday. So, so we've done that. We've also added a statement in here about chemically capturing animals because we are authorized to do that, and in, eliciting the sheriff's department's help. If Jeff can't safely chemical capture an animal, it is dangerous. Jeff and Jim are not armed, so they don't have firearms to be able to deal with an animal like that, which I think they should have, but they do not. So we would have to call upon a deputy to use a firearm to euthanize that animal in a case where Jeff couldn't control it and it posed a danger to the public, an immediate danger. So, you know, usually in most cases, Jeff or Jim can trap them or, you know, chemically capture them with the dart gun and everything's fine. But in some cases, that's not always possible. So we wanted to put that in there. And then we've expanded the vicious dogs. Well, actually, section 4, number 5 is something that really wasn't spelled out before. But when we impound an animal, state law requires us to notify the owner if at all possible, if the owner is known or if the animal has identification. So I've illustrated what we feel is a reasonable effort to make notification to the owner. And these steps here, I wanted to put down in writing so that everyone understands this is what we will do in an attempt to, you know, to notify the owner of an animal if we can at all possible notify them. It's not always the case, but we've had several animals that we've scanned for microchips that we've been able to reunite with their owners because they microchipped them or trace rabies tags. But anyway, that's a new section in there. Section 5 differentiates now between a physical injury, if an animal, dog or cat, bites someone and causes physical injury versus serious physical injury. The current resolution allows a domesticated animal to become a victim twice before the dog can be deemed vicious. You know, those of us that own animals don't want, you know, I don't want my dog to be victim number 1 and that other dog get a free pass for biting him. I don't think that that's fair in any way. So what I've done here is define and outline physical injury and serious physical injury, and then the steps that animal control can take when they are called out on a dog bite case involving either a human being or a domesticated animal or livestock. And, you know, in a case where it's just a physical injury, then Jeff and Jim will have the option to allow quarantining of that animal at the owner's home, or they can seize the animal, impound it, and quarantine it at the center, and then release it back to the owner. Or if the owner chooses, they can initially turn the ownership over to Jeff or Jim, and then we can euthanize that animal, because we can't possibly adopt an animal that's bitten someone. We can't, there's no way we can do that. Once it's recorded, I just can't put the public at risk nor the county at liability for that action. So the second part of it, on the serious physical injury, you know, we've defined that as an attack that causes serious physical injury that requires immediate medical attention to stop bleeding or repair broken bones or whatever the case may be. And then we've also included domesticated animals. If they require immediate veterinary care, then that qualifies as a serious physical injury. And same thing for livestock. If you have, you know, if a dog attacks your goat and you have to call your veterinarian out there to save the goat's life, then that would be a serious physical injury, and that would give us the opportunity to deem that animal vicious immediately. And the steps there for us would be to immediately contact the district attorney's office, ask him to file a petition in General Sessions Court with the General Sessions Court judge to deem that animal vicious. and then the judge has the option whether to do that or to not do that. And the steps are outlined in here. If he does it, what we'll do, if the animal has a rabies vaccination, or if the animal does not have a current one, or the steps if the judge denies the petition and makes us release the dog back. Then we would still quarantine it for 10 days and then release it after that quarantine period. So that's new and different from the other one. The section 6 is violent felons that we put in here. This is the state law. Folks convicted of a violent felony are prohibited for a period of 10 years from the time they're either released from prison or released from probation to own a vicious dog. And the definition is, this is the state law. The definition is in here of what constitutes a vicious dog or a potentially vicious dog, and the steps that we can take if we do come across that. Now, the only problem here is that Jeff and Jim cannot run a criminal history on someone. So we have to have a relationship with the sheriff's department to where we can call a deputy out there, explain to them what we have. They run the criminal history, and then either tell Jeff or Jim, yes, they qualify for this, or no, they don't. And then if they do qualify, then we can take the steps outlined under the law. But we can't run a criminal history. Yes, sir.
Hey, Charlie, just wondering, I would assume some of this is covered under some of these various state specific.
Yes, sir. This is the state law, right?
Yeah, I'm just, my concern was under the new state animal abuse registry. I would assume that kind of is just a given as well. That
It is, and I can add that if the commission wants, and we can pull this out. You know, it's been a challenge for me to take this and try and decide what we want to write down in the county and be specific to us, but also, you know, like the rabies law, that is a statewide rabies law.
Yeah.
You know, we have to enforce that regardless of whether it's in this resolution or not. But part of me writing it this way was so that the public can be aware that these are some of the things that we're looking at, you know, and taking seriously. And I can add the animal cruelty section in the registry if you'd like me to. You know, this is just an initial.
Yeah, I think as long as we're compliant to it, which I would assume we are as a municipality within the state of Tennessee, and then I'm good with it. We don't necessarily have to go chapter and verse on it, and you don't want it to be an overly legalized document, right?
No.
You know, the whole point is clarity here and simplicity and transparency, but I think the state has moved light years ahead and evolving a little bit more understanding of what humane environments should be in the communities around animals. So as long as we're falling under that same umbrella, I'm good with it. We don't have to go in detail. We're not buying a mortgage here.
Okay.
You know, I just want to make sure that we're compliant with the overall state in our structure here, which in fact we're exceeding, I think, in what we do in many ways. So I'm good with it.
Okay. Section 7, I've expanded the animal creating a nuisance and given more examples and definition. The old ordinance allows someone to have a barking dog for an hour and 15 minutes before animal control can get a summons and have those folks brought into General Sessions Court. I don't know if any of you have neighbors that have barking dogs, but I've had that in my past, and a dog that barks for an hour and 15 minutes is extremely annoying. One that barks continuously for 15 minutes is extremely annoying, depending on what you're doing or what you're trying to do. So I'm proposing that we narrow our window from an hour and 15 minutes to 30 minutes, continuously and habitually or intermittently for a period of 1 hour. And one of the reasons I want to do that is because Jeff and Jim we get noisy dog complaints every week. And they cannot go out and sit in a neighborhood for an hour and 15 minutes straight, waiting for this, you know, listening and timing this dog barking. You know, it's much easier for them to do it for 30 minutes at a time than it is for an hour and 15 minutes. And I know the deputies don't have the time to do that. They have better things to do, so they're not going to enforce that. So I'm requesting that we shorten that down to that time period. And then the other stuff was mentioned in the old ordinance, the other subsections to it. Section 8, was originally a shorter paragraph, but Mayor Mitchell, when he looked at this, he requested that I contact the health department to see if it meshed with what they had. And Jason over there sent me their ordinance, which is primarily what we had in the old one. I've spelled it out a little better, but Section 8, Part 3, there was nothing in there about dogs being allowed in outdoor dining areas, which they are allowed in. And there's certain specifications for that and rules that folks have to follow. And then also put in the section here about service dogs and where they're, their exception for being in places inside restaurants and things like that. But this section here, Section 8, comes out of the Department of Health, Blount County Department of Health, as far as what their regulations are for dogs and cats and really other animals within a food establishment. Section 9 deals with wild or exotic animals. We do have certain animals in Blount County, wolf hybrids and other animals that are considered wild or exotic animals under the state law with TWRA. And so this has been expanded a little bit, and I've asked that persons who maintain a wild or exotic animal and have a permit through TWRA give us a copy of it. There was nothing in the old ordinance that required that. My animal control officers had no idea when they went on someone's property whether they had a permit for a wild animal or not, and what they might be going out. I think they should be aware if someone has that. So what I've asked is that folks who are allowed to keep wild animals give us a copy of their permit when it's granted to them, and then when it's renewed, I ask that they give us a copy again, so we know who maintains these animals and where they're located. So that has expanded a little bit. Section 11 is new. This is a standard for animal care and manner of keeping for animals. That's a standard in Knox County and other places, which just, sort of outlines the basic humane conditions in which a pet owner must maintain their pet. I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary with this. It just has never really been spelled out to this level before in our old resolution. And then that's it. There's nothing else that's new in here. The rest of this is just penalty and jurisdiction notes. And the last page, I've given other points for you to consider. I have not included this in this resolution, but I'm looking to the advisory board to decide whether or not you want them added. The first one is how we can deal with community cats or feral cats and what we want to do with them. We have, and I don't know how many calls you guys get a week on community cats or feral cats, but it's probably a half dozen or more easily, where people are requesting we go out and trap feral cats that are in their neighborhood. Once we bring them to the center, we try our very best to find someone with a barn or a farm that can give this cat a home. But these cats, I cannot adopt these cats as house pets. They're not going to be house pets in probably 95% of the cases. That's not going to happen. But I'm looking to this board as to how you want me to, or if you want us to do anything with that at all. Some communities have outlawed feral cats and feral cat colonies. We have one person in this county who works with feral cats in a trap, neuter, and release program. But a lot of the folks that we get complaints from and deal with and request, they don't want these cats back in their neighborhoods. And that TNR program, that's one of their standards, is if they trap cats in an area, they return them to that same area. They don't want to recolonize them somewhere else. And she can't really help us. She's so busy and full and has so many feral cats to deal with that we can't really she doesn't have the resources and the wherewithal to be able to help us with this issue. So I've put that in there for your consideration. The second one is dog and cat registration. I know Maryville, Alcoa, I guess, have dog and cat registrations. Other communities do, and they all go about it different ways. The state law allows a county and a municipality to register animals within that municipality or that county. It also specifically allows that the fees collected from such a registration program are diverted directly back into animal control services, including salaries, equipment, and it further directs that at the end of the budget year, if there's money left over from that, that it falls into next year's budget, that it is not put in the general fund, but it stays with animal control going forward. There's different ways to go about it. Some charge fees regardless. They charge less of a fee if an animal has been spayed or neutered. Some communities, and I think it was what, Maryville you talked with? Yes. Was it Maryville? They have a zero charge for someone who registers an animal that's been spayed or neutered. And then they charge, what, $15 or something to register one that has not. You know, and then I'd like you to also consider, once we deem an animal vicious, should the registration fee for a vicious animal be higher? Should that be more money for someone to maintain a vicious animal on their property? So, you know, I put that in for your consideration. And then the third section is chaining dogs or tethering dogs. Lots of communities have gone to where they outlaw this practice and modify that to where, you know, it's either a length of time, you can only chain it or tether an animal for 2 hours or an hour, or you can't do it at all. You know, what we see is that an animal that has lived on a chain, it becomes very, very territorial and almost impossible to adopt. The animal knows that it can escape, but except for a certain distance away from a threat, so it becomes very aggressive. And, you know, we've seen people that put them on chains with choke collars. They get wrapped around a tree or some other obstacle in the way, and the animal can actually choke itself to death. So, you know, this is something I've included in here as well because, you know, we currently don't have any mechanism in place for us to address this.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Is there anybody who would like to ask some questions?
Great job on this, Charlie. It's fantastic. I mean, phenomenal detail, and I think you really captured a lot of the current state of what we need here in the county. Couple of quick questions on the first section, and I'll just throw mine out there, and I'm sure some of the other appointees have questions too. But for the first section on feral cats and feral cat colonies, what's the current status in Knox County or Loudoun County? How do they address it in those counties? Have you reached out to? I
have not, Chris, but I will.
Okay.
You know, I know Young Williams gets a lot of feral cats brought to them.
Right.
So, you know, just by virtue of that fact, they probably don't outlaw them, but I'll find out.
Okay. Yeah, I just, because it could be a flashpoint. We know there's people that are passionate about feral cats, and I understand.
And I understand that, and I have 3 cats, okay? I have three house cats, I understand that. The problem, one of the problems that we have to think about, and I guess it was a couple years ago, 19% of the rabies cases came from feral cat bites. Yeah. So that's a fairly large percentage of rabies transmission from feral cats. The feral cat programs that are in effect here, the cat receives a rabies vaccination for 1 year. Well, that's fine for 365 days, but someone's got to go back out,
and find it,
that cat, okay, and give it a second rabies vaccination.
Good luck.
So, you know, that's fine and dandy, but that is not happening. And if you do adopt that type of feral cat situation, then you've got to have a follow-up program to where you have some way to identify these cats and give them another shot.
Yeah, and I think the concept here with a policy and the whole reason for ordinance and having the rabies program and the state oversight as well as the local community oversight is we first and foremost are really an extension of public health, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're creating a public health environment where we're serving the community and making it safe to walk the streets, at the same time being humane to domesticated animals. Doesn't really cover wild animals, and that's what a feral cat has become, either out of neglect or necessity. So I think it would be appropriate to find, I look at Loudoun and they're a similar county, though we're much larger than them. They have probably a similar kind of problem happening in their community. They may not have addressed it to the degree as Knox County, but there's probably some language there we could steal and bring into our docket. I agree with you. Feral cats, I mean, most of them that come to the center, all of them come to the center, we have to put down. They're not readoptable. It's one of the reasons it drives up our euthanasia rate, and it's primarily feral cats. Plus they bring in diseases, and it inherently drops the save rate on domestic cats. So it is something that's real. We have to deal with it. And I think you did a good job breaking it out here. One thing on Section 2 of dog and cat registration, I think it's something that we have to address, and I think it would be appropriate in this resolution, and it may or may not get done, but I really think it's reasonable to say for the community that has a facility that's taking 6 to 7 times the amount of animals that the city of Maryville's facility sees annually, that we don't have to necessarily copy what Maryville's doing or Alcoa's doing. I think we can, though, take a page from an overall understanding that our resources are being stretched. Our facility is phenomenal. We've got motivated, well-trained, in fact, I would consider the best trained staff in the state. We need to find a way to disperse some of the burden of providing this community service to, unfortunately, the user group that's providing some of that problem. And those would be animal owners that are probably not attentive as they should. I own a dog. I take him to the vet. We take care of him. It probably extends $500 a year in vet costs, not flea medication and all the rest. That's being a responsible pet owner. I think if we ask Blount Countyans to pay $5 a year for a dog license to help offset our costs on our world-class, I would consider state-of-the-art Blount County+Animal Center and animal control to support that effort, I think conscientious pet owners would be all about it. I do believe we have to provide a discount to pet owners that have a spay and neuter animal already. That's the $5 charge. If you don't, it's $15. And that encourages someone to get their animal fixed, because if they allow their animal to go out and impregnate other animals, they're contributing negatively to the intake in the county and actually contributing to a public health risk. So I'm all about some kind of dog and cat fee registration, having those dollars go back to wash the expenses at the center. Alcoa, you mentioned Maryville. Alcoa has a $3 charge for animals that are spayed and neuter and $10 for unaltered. Well, they don't run the facility. They have a contract with Maryville. So their fee is going to be less. In some cases, Maryville is going $0 for altered animals. I still would charge $5. And we're talking less than the cost of a pizza. Okay, so I think we have to have some reasonable charge. I'm not looking to put another burden on Blount County taxpayers. I am one. I pay enough already. I get it. But this is a very, very, very modest surcharge on the group, and I'm an owner, an animal owner. I would be more than happy to pay that to offset something that's a public service that is coming from an animal owner group or animal neglect. So I think that would be reasonable. And then the last comment I would just have, and I'll leave it up to my fellow appointees on the other comments, with chaining and tethering animals. I think there's a lot of language there that could be expanded. I know some animals are used for protection for property. I'm sensitive to that. The last thing we want is to create an animal that through neglect becomes vicious, and then Jeff or one of our other animal control officers has to risk his health to address. I don't believe chaining or tethering a dog outside with no shelter and limited access to water is anything less than abuse. It's abuse. Let's call it for what it is. At the same time, we have to be probably very detailed as to defining what this is. And I'm not an attorney, but I think time limits you mentioned, I think are appropriate. I like the fact it's here, but this is going to probably take some meat to define, because there's animals in my neighborhood that I drive when I head home that I know are tethered and then brought into the house. So they're tethered, and I think legally taken care of. They look healthy, they're humane. So I think we owe our citizenry an understanding of what we're defining here as abuse, and it's probably a time range there, and you touched on 2 hours, maybe that's appropriate. So that's probably something that needs to be part of the discussion there. But those are my comments on the three, and I just, again, want to close saying you did a great job, you know, on the ordinance. I think it's fantastic.
Anyone else? So I believe it would behoove us to send this forward to the county attorney for review. So is that a suggestion that I could get a motion on?
Well, and I guess, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to, I need some direction as to what Chris, the three sections Chris was just talking about. Do you want, you know, does this advisory board want to explore any or all of those, or do you want to leave them alone and leave it out of it? Because if we're going to explore them, then they have to be written out, and then I think it needs to come back before this group again, and then pushed to, I guess, the attorney or the commission for a vote. So, you know, that's my thought on it.
I'll leave that to the board here. So what's your pleasure?
Yeah, my desire, I think, I guess the question here, I know we're right up against budget. Is there anything particularly that's tied to the fiscal year in this ordinance that is dependent on passing before the July 1 start? Okay.
No, sir.
So we don't have a timeline on the budget. I would like to add a section, and I'll defer, Charlie, to have you draft it as you see fit, but I think a section on licensing. And I would be very modest with the licensing. I'm not interested in taxing Blount Countyans, but I think some kind of license here is appropriate, some licensing fee, $5 perhaps for altered animals and $15 for unaltered. We have to determine what the cost is of a tag. You know, Alcoa uses them, Maryville uses them. We can make a phone call over there. They obviously are nominal in charge. Distribution of that, again, we'd have to work that out. But I think it would be an annual registration. The other thing on the feral cat and cat colonies, I think it would behoove to just survey those other counties as to what they're currently doing. And maybe it's Knox County first, and then bring that back to us or communicate it to us in between the meetings so we can read up on it and make the edit in the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
I think that would be appropriate. And the same thing on chaining and tethered dogs, because I have no idea where to start on that with you, Charlie, but I think you're on the right track with a time limit, just to address, obviously, the most inhumane environments where people are actually using it randomly or have the dog within a restricted area that's got adequate cover and water. It's going to be tough for me to say no to a business owner on that. I think that's a reasonable use. So,
and I think one other thing that they've looked at, or the ones that we've gotten some information about, is it addresses the collar, the type of collar that's put
Right.
on the animal. You know, not a choke type collar, something that's
Right.
more humane. If they do put pressure on that chain or that, you know, tether or whatever, it's not going to choke them or damage them. So.
yeah. So those would be my three asks or requests, Rick, that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Chris has made a suggestion. Do I have a motion, or do I have a motion to accept that? Do I have a second?
I've got a quick question, Rick.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, yeah. Are we going to replicate, I mean, I know the city requires licensing. shouldn't we not have an exception so people don't have to have 2 licenses every year? People that live in the city don't have to do this, or does that make sense?
We wouldn't cover city limits. We cover unincorporated Blount County.
Okay, that was my assumption. I just wanted to be clear that people didn't have to get 2 every year. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? How hard would it be for a license to be issued when this pet is at the vet?
Well, I'm not sure if the vet, if we can have the vets do it, or if we have to take on this responsibility ourselves at the center.
Well, I just mean if they go in there to have them neutered and get their rabies vaccine
Mm-hmm.
at that time. Otherwise, if they had it done somewhere else, they would come to you all.
Right. I don't know if we can ask
Yeah.
the vets to do that, to be responsible to do that, and I'm not sure that they would want to do that. I think we would have to assume the responsibility, our animal control officers, to register the animals and issue the tag. You know, once it's entered into our data management system, it can be a very simple form that can take a couple of minutes to fill out and issue the tag, and then the folks are on their way. But I don't know if veterinarians would welcome the opportunity to help us with that. You know, if I'm understanding what you're asking me correctly, I think that if we're going to register them, we have to do it through
Well,
animal control.
it would work better if it was no fee at all for the license, if they were having them spayed or neutered. Because if you have a fee, then they're having to deal with money too.
Well, if we would still need to have it in our system, we would still need, I think, to have a database of registered animals. So if they want to, you know, bring it by or send it to us or something, you know, then we can do it that way.
I live in Louisville, so I don't see, name 3 dogs that I know of. One that's tethered all the time and has 0 shelter. One that is tethered only during the day, and then when they get home from work, they bring him in. And then another one that he's got a nice surrounding, but he's tethered all the time. So these kind of people, this one guy runs a garage, and his dog has no cover for rain or anything. They're not coming in to get licensed.
No, I imagine probably a large majority of people in the county won't come in because they won't think it's necessary for them to do, or they don't want to pay a nominal fee to do it, or they think we're encroaching on their rights to have property. But, you know, if they don't do it and animal control encounters that animal, then there's something then they can take some action as far as having those people register the animal or surrender the animal. You know, but I agree with you. I think a lot of people in the county will not give this a second thought if this passes as far as registering their animal until they have to deal with animal control.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've never had a tether, but I've seen some tethers that had lengths in excess of 200 feet. I really believe those dogs were humanely treated. I believe that if we're going to explore limiting people's rights concerning their animals, that we really need to take a lot of time in making those rules, those guidelines, or the law, I guess it becomes law, concerning how much water, what kind of distance, and things like that, because I think it's absurd when an animal's on a 200-foot tether with a fabulous dog house and a wonderful source for water to tell them they can't leave that animal there all the time. I think that's wrong. I'm also concerned with adding a new tax to our people. We have plenty of people in the county that would think that that's okay, and plenty more that would take great offense to it. I would strongly recommend us doing or pursuing a registration that has no fee and pursue a voluntary donation on the paperwork for our animal center rather than mandating a price. There are plenty of folks that elect to live in the county because of things like this, and I believe that we're infringing upon what they've elected to do if we're not real careful there. There are plenty of pet owners that would relish that idea, but I would be very concerned with passing a new tax. And that's basically what this becomes. So that's my thought. Thank you.
I think that's a valid point, and I love the fact what you just said, Charlie. You know, what's the compliance? You know, right? I mean, what really will be the compliance on this? And as much as I would love to say, you know, 20,000 people will be lined up to register their pet and pay the $5 registration fee, unless it goes into the property tax or into their tags for the vehicle, what's the mechanism of getting that money? But you know, I think it's wise. I think that's a good point. I do believe pet owners that are conscientious are already, frankly, donating time and money to the center and would do that again for this tag. I like the idea of being able to get tags at least on the animals so we can rehome them. I mean, the rabies tag should be there already. It's state law. Oftentimes it's not. It speeds up the rehoming process and it frankly frees up one of our kennels, which is always under stress. So, you know, I think it's a baby step forward, and I think it's probably the least objectionable. I would love to say we can get there, you know, with a $5 and a $15, but, you know, I'm open to my fellow appointee on that. I think if it's a voluntary, I'm good with that. And let's just suggest a voluntary $10 donation, and it's up to the citizen.
Being the owner of very tiny animals, I am opposed to another metallic tag. I would like to have the option of a tattoo or something rather than having my 2.5-pound dog carrying another metal tag around his neck. Thank you.
So, we've seen some different options out there. So send it back to Charles to add to that and revise it, and then bring it back to us again to look at it. So,
Yes, sir. And if you have suggestions, if you just email them to me or call me. And I do agree and recognize Commissioner Aker talking about the animal whose owners actually do care for it in a humane way and tether it properly and allow it room to run and have shelter and water. But I'm afraid there are many, many more folks in this county who have chosen to live in the county for reasons that Commissioner Aker has illustrated, who treat their animals merely as property that get some attention every now and then. And that's the purpose of this chaining and tethering, is to give our animal control officers a mechanism when we do find the guy that's staked his dog to the ground with a logging chain and a pinch collar and its water is green, that we have some option other than calling the SPCA and waiting for them to do something about it. So I think we can write that to where we can differentiate that, and where, you know, folks can understand, yes, you can do this, but you have to do it under these conditions.
Maybe even have something concerning the water being fresh water. I mean, some degree of freshness to the water.
Well, that's in that care and manner of keeping animals. They've got to have clean, fresh water daily, and they've got to have sufficient food and nourishment, you know, daily. because we've seen instances, instances here recently that Animal Control has dealt with where these people left to go out of state, left a cooler under their porch with water in it and a couple of bags of dog food strewn on the ground. Well, that's not humane care and sheltering, in my opinion. That's cruelty and neglect. So, that's one of the reasons why we put that manner and care of keeping in there, because they thought that was acceptable, but it's really not, in my opinion.
I may have missed it. Do we have anything in here concerning pets and vehicles?
Well, we've got something in there about I think it comes under the at-large category. In other words, we don't have something if you're referring to a pet left in a vehicle in a hot. I think, and I don't know, frankly, I'm ignorant of that, if the state law covers that or not. Jeff or Jim, do you know that? Does Tennessee have a state law about animals left in a vehicle?
It is now okay, if you find an animal, you can bust a window, get the animal out without financial repercussions.
If it's a certain temperature outside, or if the animal's struggling or whatever.
The animal's in distress. Because before it only applied to children. They included animals in that.
So I can add that, Commissioner, into that. I can research that and add that in to where we do have that in our resolution, the stipulations for that. Because I agree with you, we run into that also where animals are left in a hot car and to fend for themselves. So.
So I guess with those additions for Charles to look at, we want to send it back to him to amend this resolution. So I guess I'll ask for a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion moves. The next meeting we have scheduled for Thursday, June 23rd. Does that time frame look good for everyone?
One question before we set that. Charlie, you going to be able to do this running around and get that done by then?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be done.
All right.
So is everyone in agreement of that date? 26? Okay. Angie, is that good for you? Okay. Everyone else? All right. With that, input on items not on the agenda? Oh, Karen? Let me get your line. There you go.
Thank you. I just have a question. I was going through the travel reports, and I have a question on an expense that the Animal Control Office used on the SunTrust bank card. And this is the date of January 28th of this year. And it's an expense of $189.10 for a Ridge Motel. And also an expense for Bob Evans and Starbucks the same date, and that was $510.47. And I was just wondering why those expenses were incurred.
I didn't hear, I now apologize, I didn't hear the first charge. What was the, $189 for what?
Ridge Motel.
Okay, that was, I traveled to Texas to pick up the new animal control unit, which was installed on Jeff's truck.
Okay.
Jones Trailer Company is located there.
Okay.
And it was cheaper for me to drive there than it was for them to ship it to us.
Okay.
The second charge was what?
Bob Evans and Starbucks.
That is probably off the Smoky Mountain Animal Care Foundation travel card, and that's for transport drivers. Their food and snacks and other things fall under Smoky Mountain Animal Care's budget.
Okay.
And it comes out of their line item, their monies that they supply for transport.
Okay. Well, it'd be easier to track where it says SunTrust bank card. That's our county card.
Yeah,
So
they're
the-
issued one also.
So they're issued one also, but it's under your area. It comes under your expense, but you're saying it's the Smoky Mountain people.
Well, it
Right,
should-
but
it
they
should-
share it together.
Well, no, we don't share it. Our budgets are separate. My county budget, I have a county purchasing card, Jeff has a county purchasing card. Smoky Mountain Animal Care Foundation also has a county purchasing card issued by purchasing for transport. And it
Okay.
says transport on it. And the bills are separated. When we get the bills for those drivers, when they go to Minnesota or they go to New York or Pennsylvania transporting animals, they turn in their receipts for their meals, their snacks, their hotel, and they also use the Right Express gas card to pay for gas, but all that is different and separate from our county budget. So
Okay.
those bills are paid out of Smoky Mountain Animal Care Foundation's budget, which is
Okay.
their donated money, $180,400 per year.
Okay.
And it comes out of their budget. So
All right.
when we have to pay bills, Beth separates those two cards out. So that's why that charge is there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other input from the public? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? We're adjourned. Can I use this?